My name is Jada. I'm part of the water pollution group along with Kelsey and Caitlin. Today I'm going to be talking about surface water. So, surface water includes lakes, oceans, streams, rivers, ponds, reservoirs, and wetlands. This is different from groundwater because it has the ability to disperse and become diluted as it travels throughout additional bodies of water. Groundwater also has less room for contaminants to move around because it's located within holding tanks. There's two types of pollution. So there's point source pollution, in which pollution comes from a single source, and there's non-point source pollution, in which pollution comes from many uh, surfaces. The tab here kind of shows the difference between surface water and groundwater, and then down here shows examples of point source and non-point source pollution. So there's many different types of surface water pollution. There's microplastics, chemical, suspended matter, microbiological, and atmospheric. And I'll kind of talk through each one of these. So microplastics are pieces of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter. 79% of all plastic ends up in landfills or in the natural environment. So only 9% of this actually gets recycled. That equates to 1 in every 10 plastic bottles ending up back in our environment. And if our consumption rate continues, we'll have another 33 billion tons of plastic by the year 2050. Plastic is used in consumer products, either in the product or as part of the production process. So, an example of this facial scrubs and toothpaste, these microplastics within them will make their way down the sink and end up in rivers and oceans. In 2015, President Barack Obama signed a bill to prohibit the sale of products that have these microbeads in them to kind of cut back on this. So, over time, plastic containers and bottles don't retain their shape due to weather, UV radiation, and water, which will eventually make this larger piece of plastic into microplastic. The life cycle of plastic is about 450 years. It's because plastic's a relatively new product, so environmental bacteria has not really developed enough to break down the molecular structure of plastic. And we can see this in bottom feeders within the oceans. So, bottom feeders in the oceans are model organisms in studying the microplastics here. They draw in large amounts of water to eat algae and leftover particles of food. So, in doing this, they actually will withdraw in microplastics. So, these will impact their reproductive systems, making their offspring small and less robust as well. The average shellfish eater is exposed to 11,000 particles of microplastics yearly. So, we can see now that microplastics are entering our food systems. The WHO has called for an assessment of microplastic in our environment and its impact on our human health because we still truly don't know the exact impacts that microplastics have on us. Along with this, wastewater can remove more than 90% of microplastics from water, but we still don't know what the implications of this are. There was a study also done comparing Lake Hofskull to Lake Superior, and they found the microplastic concentration was higher in Lake Hofskull, which is interesting because it's a much smaller lake, and the town off of it is very much smaller than the towns around Lake Superior. And it was actually found that this is because the towns around Lake Hofskull don't have proper waste management systems, which actually plays a large role in preventing microplastic buildup in the water systems. Next, we have chemical pollution. So there's 1.2 billion acres of farmland in the US alone, which plays a large role in water quality, especially when it comes to chemical pollution. So the extent of farm activities on landscape include, soil disturbing, during farming, sediments, nutrients, pesticides, and herbicides all leaking into our water systems. Chemical pollution is the leading cause of negative water quality impacts to our rivers and streams. It's the third leading cause for lakes and the second leading cause for wetlands. So Yearly, there's 500,000 tons of pesticides used, 12 million tons of nitrogens, and 4 million tons of phosphorus fertilizers annually in the United States. So 46% of rivers and streams have excess nutrients, and only 28% are assessed as health based on their biological communities. So 21% of lakes have high algal growth, and 39% have measurable levels of cyanotoxin, which is a byproduct of bacteria. And 20% of coastal waters have high nutrient levels. And along with this, ocean water is polluted daily by oil. That's something we don't usually hear about. Oil spills make up 12% of the oil in our oceans, with the rest coming from shipping, dumping, and drains. Oil doesn't mix with water, so it ends up suffocating fish. It gets caught in bird wings and blocks light from photosynthetic aquatic plants, really proving to be harsh for our water systems. Next, we have suspended matter. These are pollutants that don't dissolve in water because their molecules are too big to mix between the water molecules themselves. And so, because these pollutants won't dissolve, the particles will actually eventually settle at the bottom and form a thick silt, which is really harmful for the life that lives on the floors of rivers, lakes, and oceans. Biodegradable substances are also suspended in water and can cause problems with the increased number of anaerobic microorganisms present, which will play a key role. These microorganisms play a key role in water treatment as well. Then we have microbiological. So this is actually a natural form of water pollution from microorganisms present already. However, sometimes there are bacteria and viruses that get into our water systems, and these can either be helpful, but they can also be harmful if they, outcompete other uh, agents present. And typically, these agents are from runoff. Typically, we see sewage runoff, and that's when we think of this microbiological pollutants associated with disease. Then we have atmospheric water pollution. So this is pollution actually from air pollution. So the water vapor mixes with carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and sulfur oxide to form a weak acid. So then we get acid rain, which is harmful for water life, but also harmful for human life as well. So nitrogen and phosphorus are important for plants. However, excess of this causes algal blooms, which contributes to dead zones. As algae die, they sink, and in this process, it consumes oxygen, which depletes the supply for healthy marine life. So, globally, there's really technically one ocean, which is split into the 5 basins where they get their names from: the Pacific, Atlantic, Arctic, Antarctic, and Indian Oceans. Surface water is not drinking water, so wildlife really takes the brunt of the pollution effects here we see. The Pacific Ocean is actually the most polluted. China, Indonesia, and the Philippines are some of the biggest contributors to this. So later on, I will talk about garbage patches, which we have the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which again is from China, Indonesia, and the Philippines, and a lot of it is thought to actually come from the large amount of imports and exports they deal with in those countries, and the amount of plastics they take in there, of which we also see waste management being an issue for these countries as well. However, there are some issues with statistics globally because obviously the ocean is huge. It's really hard, to cover all of that ground. We also have to think about boundaries for these oceans and which boundary is within which country and things of that nature. So that's kind of further complicate it as well. Again, and then we have the Save Our Seas Act, which was passed in January of 2020. So there's three main pieces to this act: the strengthening of the U.S.'s response capability with a marine debris foundation, enhancing global engagements to combat marine debris, and improving domestic infrastructure to prevent marine debris. So, in sum, their focus will be research, prevention, and reduction. Uh, it will receive 10 million a year for the next 5 years and hopes to cut down on our pollution and come up with solutions to save the oceans, because it has proven to be really hard to clean up the oceans, as again they're very big. We have to think of currents and where all of the garbage is truly going. So, future research globally, I will talk about mismanaged waste systems and marine debris and the biggest offenders. So, I had mentioned China and Indonesia prior, and then how those relate to garbage patches we see. Every ocean has a garbage patch, just the Pacific Ocean is the largest. Within the US, I will talk about where surface water is polluted the most and what the contributing factors to this are. In Iowa, I will have a large focus on the Mississippi River since it runs through the western Midwest boundary, and we also know that it is the most polluted river in the United States. And with this, I'll have a large focus on agriculture because I know that that plays a large role in the pollution of the Mississippi. And then locally, I'll talk about some surface water available to Iowa City, so like Lake McBride and things of that nature. Thank you.